Welcome AGP students, this is Morgan Pesic, your reading and writing guru, and today we are talking about the critical reading section of the SAT, more specifically sentence completion questions. And by the end of the video, I hope that you can confidently say, I can understand the types of sentence completion questions and strategies I should use to answer them. So first, what are sentence completion questions? Well, these are going to be questions on the critical reading section that are going to test your vocabulary, but also your ability to understand the logic of complex sentences. These questions comprise 19 questions on the critical reading section, so that's 28.4% of the critical reading portion. And just to give you a heads up, I want to go ahead and make you familiar with the instructions that you would see on the test. If you're familiar with them in advance, then you don't have to waste test time reading through what you need to do. So this is what you would see on the test for sentence completion questions. Each sentence has one or two blanks, each blank indicating that something has been omitted. Beneath the sentence are 5 words, or sets of words, labeled A through E. Choose the word or set of words that, when inserted into the sentence, best fits the meaning of the whole sentence. So now you know what you need to do, and you don't have to waste any test time on the day of the test figuring out what you have to do for sentence completion questions. Next, we're going to talk about the types of sentence completion questions. First, we have vocabulary and context, and second, we have logic-based. And now I'm going to spend some time talking about what each of those are more specifically. So first, vocabulary and context. Just like it sounds, these types of questions are going to require that you know your vocabulary in order to get them right. And that's because usually part of the sentence will either give you the definition or clues to a definition of the word that needs to be inserted into the sentence. Let's look at an example. Ravens appear to behave blank, actively helping one another to find food. This second part of the sentence, actively helping one another to find food, or more specifically, helping one another, restates or defines the meaning of the word that needs to be inserted. So knowing that, we can look at our answer choices. A, mysteriously, does that mean helping one another? No, so that can be eliminated. Warily, no, does not mean helping one another. Aggressively, nope. Cooperatively, yes, cooperatively does mean helping one another, but let's just double check answer choice E in case it's better. Defensively, no, defensively does not mean helping one another. So that means cooperatively appears to be our best answer. It means the same as helping one another. Okay, now we're going to talk about logic-based, the other type of question for sentence completion. You're still going to have to know the meaning of words and how they fit into the context of a sentence with logic-based questions, but with these types of questions, you're going to also have to be able to follow the logic of a complex sentence. So when you're doing logic-based questions, you have to look for what I call trigger words, especially transitional words and conjunctions, because they're going to help you to predict what kinds of words would most appropriately complete the sentence. And let's look at an example for this as well. After observing several vicious territorial fights, Jane Goodall had to revise her earlier opinion that these particular primates were always blank animals. So let's look for our trigger words. First one is after, and that tells us that the info or the information from the beginning of the sentence is going to affect what comes later in the sentence. We have revise. This tells us that something is going to change, and it's going to change after the events that were described at the beginning of the sentence. And lastly, the end of the sentence, her earlier opinion that these particular primates were always blank animals. So now we know what is changing, her earlier opinion. So we need a word that would convey the same meaning as something that would have had to have changed after seeing a vicious fight. So if we think about ignorant, if her earlier opinion stated that primates were ignorant animals, that wouldn't necessarily change after she watched a fight. So we would eliminate that. Inquisitive? No. Responsive? No. Cruel? No, actually cruel would be the same, seeing territorial fights. So we're left with peaceful. If she had previously said that primates were always peaceful animals and now she has to change that opinion after seeing territorial fights, then this seems to be our best answer. So we look for trigger words and then we see which word best fits the sentence. Okay, now that you know the two different types of sentence completion questions, let's talk about strategies that we can use to help us answer these questions. And the first one is to start by reading the entire sentence, saying blank for the blanks. And you saw me model this when we were doing those examples just now. And the reason behind this strategy is it gives you a sense of the sentence, what words you can already start thinking about to complete the sentence, and also helps you with the logic of the sentence. Circle or underline any trigger words that reveal the logic of the sentence, and you saw that on the slide as well for that last example. You're going to especially want to take note of conjunctions. Be aware that some of the most difficult sentence completion questions contain negatives, and the reason why it makes it difficult is because it's harder to follow the logic of the sentence with negatives. If you look at this example, according to Burgess, a novelist should not preach, for sermonizing has no place in good fiction. And there's a negative in each clause, should not preach and has no place. And we have this transitional word for, which is a one-way conjunction that indicates that the second part of the sentence is going to explain the first part. So a novelist should not preach. We could almost insert the word because right here, because sermonizing has no place in good fiction. For and because are both one-way conjunctions. But negatives make it just a little bit more difficult to keep the logic of the sentence parallel. Okay, some more strategies that will be helpful for you. As you're reading the sentence, try to predict what word or words you would insert into the sentence. And then when you look at the answer choices, try to find the word or words that was similar to what you thought. You might find yourself automatically doing this while you're reading the sentence, and that's good. With two blank questions, try eliminating some answers based on just one blank. This has been one of the most helpful strategies for me as I've been working through practice tests. Because if one of the words in the answer choice is wrong, then the whole answer is wrong and you don't have to waste any more time on it. So the way that you work through two blank questions is you look at one blank in isolation, one blank by itself, and eliminate any of the answers that don't make sense for that one blank. And then you look at the other blank in isolation, just the second blank, and then eliminate any answers that don't work for just that blank. And that'll eliminate a good number of answer choices for you, so that then you're looking at a very small number of answer choices and you're looking to insert into both blanks for the best answer. And then remember that the instructions ask you to choose the best answer. So while one answer choice may seem to make sense, it might not be the best overall. And that's why it's really important that you need to read all the answer choices. If you come across, you're going through A and B, and then you get to C, and you say, oh yeah, C sounds really good, and you don't even look at D and E. If C sounded good, but E was a better or the best answer, then you just got that question wrong. So make sure that you read all the answer choices. Even if one sounds good, there might be a better answer available. And then lastly, we're going to check your choice by reading the entire sentence with the answer that you have selected to make sure that the sentence makes sense. This is a really good check for logic, especially if there are negatives in the sentence. Okay, couple last things. Remember, all the information is there, so you can use the context of the sentence to figure out what the missing words mean. And that means you don't have to look at the answer choices first. Every answer choice is grammatically correct. If you're like me and you're a grammar guru, you might be disappointed that you can't count on grammar as a way to eliminate answers. And then lastly, sentence completion questions appear in order of difficulty. They're going to start off with easier questions and they're going to get harder towards the end of the section. So especially as you do work through and get to the end of the section, be careful and read each answer choice and sentence very carefully. And depending on what your target score strategy is, you might be skimming and skipping these questions altogether. Okay, now that we've gone through strategies, let's work through a couple of examples. Example 1. The research is so blank that it leaves no part of the issue unexamined. So this is a vocabulary and context question, because this part right here, leaves no part unexamined, is telling us what needs to be inserted, or what type of word needs to be inserted into the blank. That's our definition or clues to the definition. Now, you might not have time to do this sort of activity on the day of the test, but especially as you're practicing, this might be a good activity for you to use. You can draw 4 blanks underneath the question, and before you even look at the answer choices, try to brainstorm your own words that you would insert into the sentence. So the research was so blank that it leaves no part of the issue unexamined. What words could we come up with that mean the same thing as leaves no part unexamined? Well, I came up with a few on my own. Complete, thorough, comprehensive, or exhaustive. All these words mean that no part would be left unexamined. So now I already have an idea of what type of word I'm going to be looking for when I look at my answer choices. And so if we look at those answer choices, there's comprehensive, and that was one of my words. But even so, let's look through the rest of the answer choices to make sure that nothing else is better. Rewarding, no, that does not mean leaves no part unexamined. So we're going to eliminate that. Sporadic, nope. Economical, no. And problematic, no. Okay, so let's do our check to make sure that this word is the best word to go in the sentence. The research is so comprehensive that it leaves no part of the issue unexamined. Yes, that makes sense. Logically, it makes sense. Now, just to clarify, even if this wasn't one of the answer choices, say the word was inclusive, I would still be able to know that inclusive is the right answer doing that activity with the 4 blanks, because those words complete and thorough and comprehensive and exhaustive all are synonyms to the word inclusive. So even if you don't see the words that you came up with in the answer choices, you can still find a word that means the same thing as what you brainstormed. Okay, so let's look at another example. Despite their blank proportions, the murals of Diego Rivera give his Mexican compatriots the sense that their history is blank and human in scale, not remote and larger than life. Okay, this is a logic-based question because we're going to have to be looking for trigger words like despite and phrases human in scale and remote and larger than life. Now with 2 blanks, I'm going to show you how to use that strategy where you look at blanks in isolation in order to eliminate answer choices that are wrong. So the first blank needs to be the same, or needs to have a word that means the same as larger than life. Because if you look at the logic at the end of our sentence, not remote and larger than life, that's what is modifying this blank up here. Alright, so now I'm not even going to look at these answer choices right now. I'm just going to look at the first answer choice. So does monumental mean the same as larger than life? Yes, it does. So I'm going to keep answer choice A around for now. Does focused mean larger than life? No, it does not. So even though I haven't even looked at the other answer choice, B is automatically wrong because it doesn't fit the first blank. Does vast mean the same thing as larger than life? Similar, so we're going to keep that around. Realistic? Nope, so we can eliminate D. And narrow? No, narrow would be almost the opposite of larger than life, so we can eliminate E. So right there, just by looking at the first blank, we've already eliminated 3 answer choices, which is great. So now we can look at the second blank in isolation, and the second blank is going to have to mean the same thing as human in scale. So looking at the answer choices that are remaining, accessible. Yes, accessible does mean something similar to human in scale, so we'll keep that around. And C, ancient. No, ancient doesn't mean the same as human in scale, so I would eliminate that, and that makes C wrong. Now, if I had started with the second blank, I could have also eliminated extraneous and overwhelming, because those don't mean the same thing as human in scale. So it doesn't necessarily matter which blank you start with, but always take one in isolation and then the other in isolation. And so now I have answer choice A left, and we're going to double check, insert both of these words into the sentence to make sure that it logically follows. Despite their monumental proportions, the murals of Diego Rivera give his Mexican compatriots the sense that their history is accessible and human in scale, not remote and larger than life. Yes, logically that makes sense, so A is going to be our answer. Okay, and we're going to end with one last example. A dictatorship blanks its citizens to be docile and finds it expedient to make outcasts of those who do not blank. Alright, technically this is a logic-based question, but you're still going to need to know your vocabulary. You're going to need to know what dictatorship is, you're going to need to know what docile means, and you're going to need to know what expedient means. So a dictatorship we know is a controlling government run by one person, and docile means to be submissive, and expedient means to have a suitable way for achieving an end, or a quick way to solve a problem. So, like I said, sometimes even if it's logic-based, we're still going to have to know our vocabulary, and this would be one of those ones that would come at the end of a section. It's a little bit of a harder sentence completion question for that reason. Okay, so we're again going to do the one blank in isolation. We have a couple other triggers to be aware of. Make outcasts, and that's what the dictatorship is doing to citizens who do not do something. Now here's where we have again that really difficult part of a negative. So especially as I'm explaining this example, it's going to sound like I'm talking about the opposite, and that's because we have this negative. Alright, so since with the last example that was logic-based we started with the first blank, this time I'm going to start with the second blank to show you that it doesn't matter which blank you start with. So we're just going to be looking to fill this blank, and we're only going to be looking at the second part of the answer choices. Now, the second blank is going to be what the dictatorship wants their citizens to do. And that doesn't really seem to make sense, but that's because we have the word not. If we're making outcasts of people who do not do something, then this blank needs to be what the dictatorship wants its citizens to do. I hope that makes sense. Like I said, those negatives are very tricky with logic-based questions. Okay, so if we look at our second sets of answers here, if a citizen were to rebel, that is not what the dictatorship wants their citizens to do. So answer choice A would be eliminated. Disobey. The dictatorship does not want its citizens to disobey, so we would have to eliminate that answer choice as well. Conform. A dictatorship does want its citizens to conform, so we're going to leave C around for now. The next one, D, says withdraw. That one's kind of iffy. It's not as, a blatant as rebel and disobey as a wrong answer. If a citizen were to withdraw, that could work, but can a dictatorship make outcasts of all the citizens who do not withdraw? No, logically that doesn't make sense. So D would be eliminated as well. Agree. Well, a dictatorship wants its citizens to agree, so that means we need to keep E around as an answer choice for now. Okay, so again, just by looking at one blank, we've already eliminated 3 answer choices. That's awesome. So now we're going to look at the other blank in isolation. This blank is an action that the dictatorship is taking towards its citizens. So a dictatorship requires its citizens to be docile. Remember, docile is submissive. And since it would be helpful for if they want people to conform, then requiring docility would be very helpful. So we're going to keep answer choice C around. That sounds good. Let's look at E and make sure it's not better. And it says a dictatorship forbids its citizens to be docile. Well, even though they want people to agree with them, forbidding docility would not make sense. So that takes E out of the equation for us. Alright, so that means we're left with C. And let's just insert both blanks in now to make sure that this is the best answer choice. A dictatorship requires its citizens to be docile and finds it expedient to make outcasts of those who do not conform. Yes, that makes sense. We have our answer choice. Alright, guys. So I hope at this point you can say, I can understand the types of sentence completion questions and strategies I should use to answer them. And if not, I'll see you in class and we'll work through it some more. See you then.